I'm just going to say we'll be calling the meeting to order shortly. We're just getting ourselves organized here. Are we ready yet?
I don't see a mouse. It's over here. My computer's. So I will then move us in camera. I'll stop the recording. Okay, all right. But you're still trying to get, yes, we're still trying to get Cornerstone on. For some reason, they haven't logged on yet, so.
Okay, well, gee, that's not good because we need them. But should we start getting through the first few? Okay. So I am going to call the meeting to order. The Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting is now called to order, and just doing a roll call. I want to see, we have on the screen, we have Councillor Hubley. And I think right now the councillor is the only committee member on Zoom.
Yes.
Okay.
Kathy Curry and Richard Kidd may join us.
Okay, they may. All right. And we know Councillor Atkinson is not able to join us. So do we have we have a quorum? Okay. And I wanted to welcome Jeannie, and I'm sorry, I can't remember your last name. Jeannie Kelso from Lanark County, who Highlands, I'm sorry, from Lanark Highlands, sorry. Yes, from Lanark Highlands to our meeting. And you're now our new representative from Lanark. Is that the idea? Okay, thank you. Welcome. Yes. All right, so we'll get going. So we've done the roll call. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, we will move on to the adoption of the amended agenda. We've changed the order of some of the items to allow for a better discussion of the budget later on. And also it was to allow for Cornerstone to be here. So resolved that the agenda for the November 28th, 2024 Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting be adopted as amended. So I need someone to move. So Paul Kehoe moves. I need someone to second. I see Roy Hudel seconds. All in favor of the adopted agenda, amended agenda? Right, the motion is carried. All right, so now we're on to the minutes of our last Finance and Administration Advisory Committee. Resolved that the minutes of the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting held September 30, 2024 be received and approved as printed. So I need someone to move. Someone to move. I say Mary Lou moves. Mary Lou Suter. Need someone to second. I see Paul Kehoe seconds. Are there any comments on the minutes? Not seeing any from anyone. May I see a vote of hands for the agenda, for the minutes? Thank you. Okay, the motion is carried. So we are at this point going to be moving in camera, but we need to have Cornerstone. So what's going on, people?
Because I think we can start
Okay.
without them, and I'll let them in when they come in, but we'll just have to get them going. Because I don't have a way in Zoom of reaching out to them like I did in Zoom, right? I can't phone people in Zoom, right?
All right. So we are going to move in camera to discuss a number of issues. So resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee move to in-camera session for discussion of the following matters: labor relations or employee negotiations. And that Sally McIntyre and Kelly.
So Kelly, if you could just go make that happen. If your computer's not working, you want a different computer, okay? Thanks, Kelly.
Sorry, we're just got technical issues here. So I'll just complete the resolution. And that Sally McIntyre and Kelly Howe and Joanne Glazer from Cornerstone's Management Solutions Limited, well, it says remain in the room, but basically are allowed in the room. And that Sally McIntyre leave the room before the final discussions regarding labor relations and employee negotiations. So I need someone to move us into camera. So Paul Kehoe moves us into camera. And Mary Lou Suter has seconded that. All in favor? All right, the motion is carried. Went back. All right, so we're going to get some people and then we will read out the resolutions. So just hang on a second. All right, our first resolution of the three is as follows. Resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve updates to the management salary scales and the 2024/2025 compensation for the general manager as recommended by the Executive Committee and the general manager. So I need someone to move. So I see Kathy Curry has moved. I see Paul Kehoe seconds. All in favor? So I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so the motion is carried. The second resolution. Resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve update of Section 2.3.2 overtime of MVCA's employee manual as set out herein and to implement the new program effective January 1st, 2025. I need someone to move. I see Roy Hudel moves. I see Mary Lou second. All in favor? I see the motion is carried. And the final resolution is that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee recommend that the Executive Committee examine the matter of staff merit increases and bonuses and return to the Finance and Administration Committee with a recommendation. So I need someone to move on that. So I see Jeannie moves on that. Paul Kehoe seconds. All in favor? Yes, the motion is carried. Right, so now we are on to a financial update from Stacy for 2024.
So, you all have the reports in front of you. And key overall point is we're pretty much on track. Some of the discrepancies or shifts between what comes from the budget is based on a percentage of allocation of staff wages that we determine to the best of our ability when we develop the budget. In Q3, actuals and incorporates an adjustment of the allocations. Part of developing the 2025 budget, I did a full time analysis January to October, where people actually spending their time. So I shifted people's time and I actually backdated and applied that to all the 2024 actuals as well. So that's part of where you're seeing some of the shifts between the lines, and such as conservation services, not as much time was there. There was not as much time on the Category 2 programs. So it was just some shifting there. Overall, there's also a less use of the reserves due to some increased funding and additional interest that we've earned this year. Interest rates were continuing to be good, although they're starting to decline a bit. I will be early in the new year looking to bring forward an investment policy so we can work on how can we continue to have better interest rates. The other significant change, and again, it was something we implemented with the 2025 budget, but I incorporated it into 2024 so that we had good comparative numbers, was that watershed management tech studies has historically been viewed as being the main department for engineering. So any time that they were not working on something else specific, such as dam ops or a capital project, their time was rolled into there. We've shifted that to be in line more with other CAs. So the flood erosion and control is one of the main purposes. So their now home department is the FFW flood in the flood erosion and control, and the tech studies is just work they're doing on actual tech studies. And tech studies has been split into regular tech studies and specifically hazard mapping tech studies. So that the floodplain mapping and things like that, to distinguish them. So that was a bit of a shift that we're seeing there. Capital, there was no change. Really, this is the same notes from the last time. So no real change. And on the reserve balances, we had the last time in June, when I provided the June actuals, I had noted there was likely going to be a significant reduction in the actual compensation for this year. We're incorporating a severance and some other things that have actually offsetting what I previously was predicting. But it will all be absorbed within this year's budget and potentially set up as a payable if needed. So it's not as much reduction as I was expecting before, but we're still in a good position. Do people have any specific questions?
Yeah, any questions on her year-to-date update? Right, not seeing any. Thank you very much, Stacy, for sharing the information. So we'll now move on to item 6, which is the draft 2025 budget, and it'll be Stacy and Sally.
Okay, again, for Jeannie's benefit, I'll just outline for you the history on how we got to be where we are right now. So every year, I seek budget direction from the board, primarily as it relates to what the municipal levy increase will be, because I need to know what that envelope is that I'm going to work within. And so it's based upon several variables. One is the rate of inflation to be assumed. 2 is the amount of assessment growth that we're anticipating across the entire of our jurisdiction. 3 would be in terms of capital pressures, because capital fluctuates year over year. And we also have a goal of building our capital reserves because they're undernourished at the moment. So there's that trajectory. There's also some makeup that we're doing. During the boom of 2020, 2021, we had to increase staff. We could not pay that immediately out of current year funds. So we've been using the reserves for that. With this budget, I actually removed one of those FTEs because the demand is not there as it was 3 years ago. So I've reduced the FTE complement by 1. But we still have sort of a legacy amount that we're paying payroll out of reserves. So we're continuing to phase that onto the levy. So that's another element. And then I'm just thinking if there's anything else that I think that's the key assumptions that then we move forward with. So based upon that envelope, we drafted the budget. That was approved back in October. So what you see in front of you here, are you able to pull up the actual budget document? So if you look at the first page of the staff report, I'm just going to deal with the high-level numbers for starters. So you'll see that the operating category 1, which is our core mandate items, has gone up by roughly 250,000. That is primarily a function of inflation, as well as some priority studies that we felt we needed to be moving forward with. And they're captured further on, but I'll just outline them to you quickly. There is work on soils and unstable soils and erosions that we need to do. And this would be part of our hazard management or hazard mapping strategy that we want to develop and taking that to the next step. 2 of them are climate change related studies, how we can affect, how we're anticipating changes in the functioning and then for the potentially how we operate the Mississippi River system, and then also the CARP. And the CARP less about how we operate it, but how that watershed is developed over time, looking at both the cumulative impacts of climate change and ongoing development, what's planned and what we could anticipate in future. And then lastly is continued work on our floodplain mapping program. We have received approval to move forward with floodplain mapping of the Fall River. And so it's moving forward with that project. So that's where those budgetary pressures in that line item are coming from. When you look at the second line item, which is operating category 2, and these are programs and services we entered into the bilateral agreements with your municipalities on, you'll see a high degree of fluctuation between 23 actual, 24 budget, and 25 budget. So I'm going to explain that differential to you. So between 2023 and 2024, we had to do, as Stacy alluded to earlier, some adjustments of staff allocations to, properly capture to the best of our knowledge in that year where we needed to be according staff time. When you coupled that reallocation with what proved out to be an optimistic program on the stewardship side of things, you get what I would call an inflated budget in 2024, which we're now correcting in 2025. We'd hoped to move forward with certain things in 2024 that we simply weren't able to. We couldn't access the grants. And at this point forward, I think we're just parking those thoughts and moving forward in a different direction. So in summary, the difference between the staffing allocations pre the new financial model and what we have today is really the difference between 2023 and 2025. So that's all you're seeing in there is simply the movement of staff between categories. The increase in category 3 is significant. That's primarily our education and stewardship programs. But what you're not seeing is on the offsetting side are all the grants and fees for service that we're anticipating going along with those. So though it appears as a budgetary pressure, we do have identified a means for doing cost recovery on those programs. So then lastly, you're going to see, modest adjustments year over year for the capital categories 1 and 3. And I would say that's pretty much within what you would expect in terms of us implementing the programs as captured previously in the 10-year capital plan, and again, allowing for some inflationary movement there. But this also allows for us, again, to continue building those capital reserves. So I'll stop there at this point and just see if there's any high-level questions people have about the operating.
Yeah, I'm seeing everyone. I'm not seeing any questions. So I think you can continue. We're just doing some technical things here.
Okay. I'm just going to use to see if you can really try to scroll. No, I'm screen sharing. Oh, that would explain. Well, okay. If you could, are you able to make that bigger, Kelly? That pie chart? Yeah, go back to the previous page, please. Okay, so this is simply capturing what I just discussed, but gives you sort of a sense of the relative proportion of how we're expending the annual budget. So the key I wanted to point out here is that the bilateral agreements that you all signed, or your council signed starting January 1 of this year, provided for that. This is the total budget, but within the levy portion, it provided for up to 14% of the levy to be allocated to category 2 and 3. Stacy is going to tell you what we've actually used out of that 14% allotment. We have not used that full amount that you approved. So last year we used, or this year we used what percentage?
So this year it's just over 7% that we're putting out of the 14, and last year it was 11% out of the 14.
Okay, and by last year you mean current
This
year?
current 2024 was 11%. 2025 we're projecting 7%.
So this is indicative of us trying to move towards full cost recovery on our category 2 and 3 programs.
We will at some point hit a threshold on category 2, which is a service to the municipalities, but we're really working hard to try to move in the direction that we eventually are not asking for funds under category 3. So this 2025 budget moves us from the 14 down to the 7, down to
Yeah, 14, 11
to 11 to 7, pardon me. So, and my hope is that, you know, as we move through this 5-year contract period, that eventually category 3 is as close to 0 as we can get it. So that's the goal. If you could scroll down, please.
Just so you could clarify, category 3 includes education and stewardship.
Education, stewardship, and visitor services. So that would include the museum and renting space at the Milliken Tail. So if you can scroll, yes. So what I'm going to do now is I want to just at a high level go through the different areas within the budget. So it's really just the first few pages of the budget. So starting with, let me just pull it up here myself so I can see it better. Can you online either have the original in front of you or can see what's on screen? Are you able to navigate where we are okay? You could give me a thumbs up if it's okay. Okay, very good.
Page 5.
So we're at page 5 of the budget, which is page 28 of the original, the agenda package. Okay, so again, under category 1, the operating summary and our corporate. So all of these are considered mandatory programs and services. And what you can see is to the right where the revenues are coming from. So for example, you know, when you look at watershed management, you can see that of the proposed budget, definitely most of it's coming from the municipal levy. But there is a good degree of fee-for-service cost recovery. So this, I'm flagging this because this is what the province has frozen for the past 2 years. So we're unable to, well, for the purpose of this budget, we did not assume an increase in these fees year over year.
It's been frozen for, I think, 20 years. Like,
No, well, that's the WECI funding. This is actually our planning and reg fees. Yes. So the province instituted that all CAs had to freeze their planning and regulation permit fees. So while we came to you for approval of a fee increase, the budget assumes that the province continues with that freeze. So there's an opportunity cost there. So that's why I'm flagging that. You'll also see that when it comes to flood forecasting and warning, also similarly, that's the 128 that's been frozen for 20 years. So that amount hasn't changed. That's the allocation that the province has given to MVCA for the past 20 years. So any incremental costs due to aging infrastructure, you know, and increased needs for O&M, inflation, et cetera, is always being borne by the municipal levy. Because though there's some fee for service, it's not significant. And the fee for service is the operations we do for OPG and M&R at their facilities. So it helps, but it's certainly not significant. So then when you get down to the conservation areas, this is only the category 1 programs and services. So that's trail maintenance, repair of the bridges, you know, maintenance of the outhouses, the parking lots, that sort of thing. So in the scheme of things of our overall operating budget, it's relatively modest. But there again, it's mostly borne by the municipal levy. And there's I'll call it a community kind of threshold to how much we can charge for people to attend our conservation areas. And we do have proposed in previous years, but I think we froze them for 2025.
The day use
The
rate,
day
but
use.
we increased the pass.
Right.
Right.
So what Stacy was just saying is the annual passes have gone up, but the day use we maintained at the same rate. So that's really the bulk of the than how the revenue side is looking on those Category 1 programs. If you want to look at the Category 2, flip the page 2 and 3. So Category 2 is that kind of field monitoring work and sharing of information with your planning groups to support both things like the natural heritage studies as well as the review of individual applications that come in. But it's doing that field work that supports the information to those decisions. So you can see it's actually gone down. And again, this is from 24 to 25, and that's based upon actual allocation of time that we saw since we implemented the new timesheet system. So we've been better able to capture how people are actually spending their time, and that's what this reflects. So you can see municipal levy and fee for service on that. So the lastly is the Category 3, and this is where stewardship and education, this is where you see the revenue side going up significantly. So while under stewardship, there's a significant increase, we've also shown a significant increase, not on the levy, but on the fee for service and other revenues. So, and similarly with the education program, a combination of grants, fee for service is where the bulk of that increase is going to be born. And then lastly, under visitor services, the actual costs of visitor services, we're showing a modest decrease, and that's because of changes we're making behind the scenes to operate it more cost effectively. And with, again, we've increased the fees. So the fees that you approved at the last board meeting, we're hoping to see increased revenues there. So I'm, yep.
Sorry, Mary Lou?
I'm sorry, but could you?
Oh,
Okay, this one works. Could you please just run past us the sources of other revenues?
I'll start and then I'll flip it to Stacy. So under tech, let me just see the ones that I'm most familiar with. So historically, but I'll let Stacy confirm, these have often been small grants we'll get from TD Bank or RBC, Enbridge, OPG is typically where they're coming from. As well, the foundation, our foundation has been a contributor. But as to this year, those specifics, maybe Stacy, you could say.
So there's a small amount on tech studies that's we are able to charge some engineering reports that we do externally. So that's where that is. That's where it's historically been. It should probably be moved up to fees for service. So I'll note that. On the corporate side, that other revenue is primarily our interest that we're earning. In the Category 3 stewardship, there's a couple of small grants. There's also, we have a significant grant or donation from the Danby Foundation. So that's, and sorry, just bringing out my actual detailed sheets. Education, that's an anticipation of a small grant. We're very actively applying for grants for that program. And on visitor services, we get a special grant from Mississippi Mills to help support the museum, and we get donations.
Thank you. So we continue on, and just to let everyone know, both the vice chair and chair of this committee have to leave at noon, and Paul Kehoe will take over as chair because we not only have this to get through, we also have to get through the 10-year capital plan. Okay, so just to let everyone know.
So on Oops, sorry, I will leap to, unless there's questions on the operating side of things, and there's detailed sheets behind all of these. I'll skip to the capital budget for this year. Yeah, I'm just going to try to find that myself. 16 of the budget documents, bottom right. No, there we go. Okay. Okey doke. So, the WECI capital project, so just a reminder that we got no WECI funding this year, but we did get commitments by the WECI program for funding for next year. So what this assumes is that we'll be able to proceed with works at Lanark Dam in particular for next year. And that's under the WECI one. And then it's to proceed from the EA, which we're in the midst of or just wrapping up for Kashwakamak Lake Dam, onto the detailed design. So we're hoping, by January, we're totally done with the EA and we'll be able to move into the design phase. So that's what that 167 is for, or pardon me, the 360 is for. In terms of the conservation areas, you can see the list of projects there. Just continuing with, these are regular kind of either combination enhancement or replacement projects at our facilities to maintain the safety of our sites and improve the accessibility of the sites to people with physical disabilities. And we are intending to apply for some grants for that, particularly as it relates to the accessibility work, but we haven't shown any revenue for that at this time. We're still looking into the opportunities. In terms of the corporate projects, that's the big dollar value here. That's to connect the water and sewer here. Assuming we're able to move forward on that with the water and sewer connection to this municipal supply and CP, that's the budget for this year. And that's inclusive of the amount that this board approved as the transfer of our proportion of this main infrastructure extension to the site. And then the rest is pretty standard in terms of there's some study work that we need to do, just continuing to make progress on some of the investigations that we need to do, as well as debt payment. So at the Milliken Tail, that is captured. Well, no, it's showing separately in category 3. This is the windows at the gatehouse. If somebody could just remind me. Oh, there it is. Right. So for those of you who missed that, it's at the bottom of that list under conservation areas. So you'll recall that when we did our 2023 financial statements, that there was this requirement to do ARO, the assessment of asset retirement obligations. So we were hypothesizing this is the study that will allow us to say categorically if there are obligations that we haven't captured at that site. And as I mentioned, the accessibility improvement. So that's it on the capital side. So happy to have any further questions on that.
Yeah, and this is important because the resolution will be the Finance and Administration Committee making a recommendation to the board to send this draft budget out to the municipalities. So are there any questions or comments on what's been presented or what's in the document? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. All right, this is okay. This is great. So I guess we'll move to the resolution. Resolution is resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory, I knew there were 2 A's, Advisory Committee recommend the draft 2025 budget be tabled with the Board of Directors for consideration and circulated to member municipalities for comment. So I need someone to move. So Mary Lou moves, Roy Hudo seconds. All in favor? Are any more comments or questions before I go that? No? Okay, all in favor? All right, looks like all the hands are up, so motion is carried. All right, so we're moving into our final agenda item, which is the 10-year capital plan. So it'll be Sally and Stacy again.
Okay, so we've been doing a lot of work in recent years to get a handle on the condition of our dams and to, and we did further work this fall. So we may yet want to tweak this in the few months between now and when it gets approved, or the next couple of weeks before it gets approved by the board. But we're constantly looking at what that asset renewal obligation is and doing a risk-based assessment and looking also at affordability and what we have in the reserves and trying to map out what we believe is a affordable approach to the capital program. So what you have in front of you in terms of the 10-year capital plan, which is on page 71 of the agenda package. Are you able to pull that up, Kelly? We've looked at what the needs are across the capital assets or the tangible capital assets and remapped where certain works and what works are going to be done. And at the bottom, you can see, how the obligations evolve over time. What we're sitting at under this coming 10-year period, if this plan is accepted, is basically $16.8 million in capital works over the 10-year period. So 1.6 per year, million per year. So it's not an insignificant investment on average, yes. So you have some big years, like for instance, when we do the Kashwakamik Lake Dam, obviously, yes. If you want to, yes, that's the right page. If you look at our reserve balances, just to remind everybody's on where the board landed in terms of our approach to funding our capital program was, first of all, we said largely it's going to be a pay-as-you-go program, that we are not at this time in a position to be setting aside monies for long-term investments. So we set a target that basically says on the WECI type projects, we have to be at 50%, or our target is to have reserves that are equal to 50% of that 10-year obligation, but within year eight. So we should always have 8 years of runway where we know that we can meet our 50% of that WECI obligation. So assuming, pardon? Yeah, yes. So that's the pay-as-you-go component. But if a project exceeds $500,000, this is where it's a significant capital renewal, it's intergenerational, and where we agreed we would debt finance them. So for smaller capital programs, it's pay-as-you-go. For larger capital renewal projects in the order of $1 million or greater, then we're looking at debt financing. And that's why we're not trying to build the reserve excess. We want to make sure the reserve have enough for our debt payments on those projects as they come forward. But we're not looking to finance, our self-finance those projects. We would debt finance them. Okay, so you can see the different reserve funds and where we sit. So some of them are healthy. The operating reserve is fine. The vehicles and equipment is fine, and the priority projects is fine. But you can see that there's definite room that we need to address on the headquarters, the conservation areas, the Category 3 conservation in IT, and most importantly, the water control structures. So when you're looking at where we think we're going to be 5 years out and 8 years out, or at the end of the 10-year period, this table here, table 3, shows you where our reserve balances will be if we continue to build those reserves as set out in table 1. So you may recall that the board approved a set of capital levy increases that we would implement, but we were missing those last 2 years of our capital plan. So what we're asking of you today is to approve those additions, and you'll see we do drop it down a bit because we're starting to look much healthier across the board by 2034 than certainly where we are today. So I would just like to say I've appreciated the, quite frankly, generosity of your municipalities and commitment as articulated in Table 1 to make those capital levy increases, because I know it's a challenge. So we're not recommending any changes in these interim years and simply the addition of those outer years. So that's the main item arising from this, is to afford this capital program. We're looking for that commitment to those outer year capital levy increases.
All right, are there any comments or questions on the 10-year capital plan? Right?
Just one quick question. When I'm looking at the water erosion control structures, see that Farm Lake Dam and Pine Lake Dam have an asterisk beside it? Why is that?
Can you speak to that? Right. So those two sites are not eligible for WECI funding.
All right, so are there any other comments or questions? All right, and I think oh, Richard, yes, go ahead.
Just just wondered where the interest on the reserves, is that rolling back in when you're doing your planning, or what happens with the interest?
Currently, it's feeding the operating. So if there was an operating reserve, it would feed into that. We're just starting to get the point where we have that excess investment to be able to do that. So we can look at that when we bring our investment policy forward, as potentially also incorporate that of how we're assigning that income.
All right,
I think
Any-
now that we've built those you've built those capital reserves, that the interest should be rolling back into it too. But anyway, okay.
right. I was actually going to say that, having been on the board for, I think, 10 years now, that when Sally did come in, the capital plan was completely inadequate to what MVCA was facing in terms of capital renewal. And I like to thank you for the work that you've done, getting us on track to do millions of dollars worth of dams that MVCA is facing. And I think this plan here is reflective of actually a much more healthy plan for how MVCA needs to face its obligations in the future. So thank you for that. Thank you, and to Stacy. And yes, and to Yura. And to everybody, well, to everybody in the capital plan, but yes, particularly the dams. All right, so any other comments or questions on the capital plan? So I don't see any. So resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee recommend that the Board of Directors approve the 10-year capital plan update and schedule of capital levy increases presented herein. So I need someone to move. So Paul Kehoe moves. Roy Hudel seconds. All in favor? All right, motion is carried. I think we're going to get out. So are there any more comments or questions before we adjourn? All right, not seeing any. Resolved that the Finance and Administration Advisory Committee meeting be adjourned. I need someone to move. So Mary Lou moves. Jeannie seconds. Jeannie Kelso seconds. All in favor? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We did
Thank
it
you,
in minutes. I
everyone.
know,
Very
I
much
mean,
appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah.